stop asking stupid questions. Stupid questions, what I will call it, are questions that are brainless, are questions that are too overly asked, such as what do you do for work? Where are you from? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite movie? Things like this. Even though these questions get to the point and will probably get you an answer that you want, but I want you to think of this. How many times have you heard of these questions? And do you feel excited when you answer these questions? Or do you feel like it's boring? Or you feel nothing pretty much because you've been answering this question probably since the day you were born. So instead, I want you to be creative. I want you to be a bit more mindful of the type of questions you ask. So instead of asking, what do you do for work? You can ask, how did you get into your line of work? If you ask how, they might actually tell you the entire life story. For example, there was one time I asked a person that I just met, how did they get into their line of work? They start telling me how their high school experience shaped who they are. And as a result, this is why they do what they do. When you ask a how question, what other people are thinking, this person cares about the reason why I get into what I do. And at the end, she tells me that she's a pharmacist. And because of a high school experience of her getting sick, she values healthcare. They didn't have the access to access a primary care physician immediately. Therefore, she went to a pharmacy and then she saw and interacted with the pharmacist. And she wants to be at a position of power and authority where she can make a lot of decisions. And that inspired her to do what she's doing now. You see, from I'm a pharmacist to high school experience, felt inspired, and then she became who she is today. She gave you a load of stories, a load of things to work on. When you're having conversation with someone, they will give you subtle cues. For example, she felt inspired, therefore she got into the healthcare field that she's in. You can elaborate, you can ask her to elaborate. So do you value inspiration or do you value hardworking? Like if you ask questions based on what they tell you, you not only spark their interest, you will let them feel like you're a good communicator. You will let them feel that you actually care about why she does what she does or why he does what he does. So stop asking boring questions. Another example, you ask a question like, what do you do for a living? They say they are a waitress. Instead of saying, oh, do you enjoy waitressing or being in hospitality? You want to tailor your questions. You can say something like, I have friends that are in the hospitality field. How do you feel when people treat you like shit? Everyone knows that hospitality staff are treated very poorly. Unfortunately, that's just how people are. People are dickheads. But if you can trigger their emotional response, they'll give you a load of information to how they wish. So give these questions a go, but don't ask boring questions.